What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So today I wanted to share my thoughts regarding a video game that's coming out in the superhero genre, but is not necessarily getting a lot of buzz because for the most part, superhero games have had a specific kind of methodology behind them. They've mostly been single player games. They've mostly had a specific protagonist, a theme, and then they will basically follow a lot of the canonical plots and things within that superhero genre. And that's how we've been mostly used to playing a lot of superhero games. But in this particular video, we're going to be looking at Marvel's Midnight Suns. Now, the game got a leak more recently, but I'm not necessarily interested in the leak. In fact, I don't think my interest in Marvel Midnight Suns is actually that high because of the way the game is structured. The game really does deviate from that particular paradigm of superhero games that I just described in the beginning of this video. It's not going to be the regular superhero game where you run around and beat up a bunch of bad guys, because that's just not how the developers actually do their work. Now, the big thing nonetheless is this development team is known for making XCOM, which is one of the turn-based video games, much more prolific turn-based games out there, and is very reputable. And they were able to secure the license to take this particular video game strategy and build around the Marvel universe using Marvel heroes, and even some heroes that we have not necessarily seen in video games in a long time, example being Blade. Now, I wonder if DC has not reached that point where they probably have to take this approach, because for the longest time, they've kept their game development to a very small, select number of video game developers, which are basically under the Warner Brothers whole theme. And I think at first this probably made a whole bunch of sense. The reason is because it allowed for better quality control, because in the past, this was actually something that DC had done before. I mean, there's a Batman game that was actually made by Ubisoft, or a series of Batman games actually, that were actually developed and published by Ubisoft. There are Batman games that were published by EA. There were Spider-Man games that were, I'm not moving into the Marvel side anyways, that were published by Activision, and a bunch of Marvel games. And some of these licensees, pretty much expired, and eventually they've gone back to the original license owners, like say DC and Marvel in that sense. But in the case of DC, with all of these licenses moving back to DC Studios, I wonder if this is not hampering their production in a sense, compared to, say, if you look at how Marvel right now has things set up, where they actually have a very good number of other development studios that are working on their games and actually opening up the door for different kinds of their games, or their games being represented in different ways to suit broad audiences. The most recent example is Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy. This is the one game where anyone can go in and say, this game actually did a wonderful job in being able to showcase what Square Enix was wanting to do in terms of showcasing their studio that developed the game, and say, okay, this is a video game style that we're actually very good at. And they did a very good job. The execution was, in my opinion, impeccable in how they delivered Guardians of the Galaxy to everyone. They used the style of development that they've used in their previous Final Fantasy games, and that actually appealed to an audience, and it focused on a protagonist, and it's something different. And thankfully, this game was actually in development, because Avengers had already done something terrible to the Marvel games at the 2020 window. It was not a game that a lot of people enjoyed, so Guardians of the Galaxy was a breath of fresh air. And so now in the DC side, isn't it, in my opinion, and I'm asking you guys here in the audience, don't you think that this is probably going to be something that is beneficial overall for the DC games? I mean, I'm certain that many people think so. This is not just my own thinking. If you were to, kind of like assess it and say, okay, what do you think about this? I think as much as we would love to see Warner Brothers' own studios continue to, take up the mantle and continue to just do their own thing, it kind of slows down a lot of the potential that's there. There are many really valuable superheroes, and I'm certain that there are more studios that are just pining to get a hold of these characters and show them off in a solid way. I mean, if you even look at more, like the 2017 video game releases around DC, you'll see that even NetherRealms is also really solid in their own representation for the DC characters in their video game Injustice 2 and even Injustice 1. They've done such a very good job that you can't contest as to how good their development was in terms of the game and its mechanics and all of those things. Yes, there's some mechanics that are really interesting for that game compared to, say, Mortal Kombat, which I'm a huge player of. I play Mortal Kombat a lot. But regarding Injustice, I can say that it really shows that the hands of these developers, if they were to broaden and diversify who's able to take on these DC projects, I think it's really going to open the doors more than we have actually seen, in the last few years. So Midnight Suns really did inspire this particular conversation, and I wanted to share my thoughts, and I wanted to just see how you guys here in our community will respond to something like this. Do you think it's a viable proposition? Do you think now the developers need to pursue other studios being able to make DC games around DC superheroes? Because this opens up the door now, and this actually lets things flow better. Imagine a studio that's very talented, a studio that's actually well, grounded, dealing with some of these IPs. They'll do a good job with them, and I know Avalanche is working on that Wonder Woman game. I'm very aware, but it's just a very, very select number of studios that are picking up these projects. And it would be nice if more studios, even small indie studios, it would be nice if they could actually show their own work and just use what they already know with these superheroes, their stories, and their diversity in a sense, and there's many of them, and bring them to light for a big and broader audience. So talk to me in the comment section. I look forward to hearing from you guys. I appreciate your comment. I appreciate your participation in these videos, and we'll talk very soon. Peace out.